Hello, everyone, and welcome to A Day in the Life Homeschool Edition. My name is Olivia Blacknaw, and I'm here to share with you a bit about my journey as a home educator. I have 4 children, 3 girls, ages 16, 14, and 12, and a boy who is 10 years old. We have been at this for 11 years, or since my oldest daughter was in kindergarten. My oldest went to high school in the 9th grade, and my second oldest will be joining her in the fall in an IB program, International Baccalaureate Program. Prior to teaching my children at home, I taught history at a public high school. So you may hear me refer to myself as a home educator, and that is because having been in the public school setting, I am not trying to replicate what is done there. So just a bit on the language there. In addition to teaching at home, I am also one of the troop leaders for my daughter's Girl Scout troop, made up of 20 middle school and high school age girls. And I'm also the primary caregiver for my 85-year-old father who suffers from dementia. He's been with us for 5 years now. And as the years have gone by, we have had to make adjustments to our schedule in dealing with him and providing care for him. But it all worked out. As far as our schedule goes, we take 2 months off during the summer, with the exception of math. That's one of those lessons that I learned the hard way. The kids can lose so much ground in math in 2 months. So I try to make sure that they get some math in, even if it's in a relaxed form, such as doing math drills online or doing a Life of Fred book, or even just doing a few problems every week with math to help keep them on track. While I don't provide report cards, I do a formal assessment every year with standardized testing starting in the 1st grade. With timers and everything, we do it in a very formal setting. It marks the conclusion of our academic year, and we've used the CAT, the California Achievement Test. We've used the ITBS, the Iowa Test of Basic Skills, the ACT, and the SAT. And we participate in this exercise because it helps to demystify the testing process for my children. They're not afraid of the process. They know exactly what to expect. In fact, when my second oldest daughter took the ACT in the 7th grade in order to qualify for Duke's talent and identification program, she was just kind of dumbfounded to find the high schoolers that she was testing with were so freaked out by the ACT. They were crying, and the proctor was walking around passing out tissues, and I guess that was normal for them. But it was not normal for her because it was just part of what we did every year. But even if my children chose not to participate in a program such as Duke Tip where they require testing, or if they chose not to go to high school, I still feel like testing would be something that I would do on an annual basis because eventually they would need it for college. So that is something that we do on an annual basis. For our weekly schedule, my 14-year-old this past year was in the Classical Conversations Challenge program, which meets once a week, and it is a drop-off program. And she gets all of her assignments that one day a week and then completes them. She completes the rest of them at home during the week. My youngest daughter was taking academic classes outside of the house where it was also just a drop-off. And then we also participated with my youngest two children in a small co-op for academic classes where I taught one of the classes. When one child is in a class, I try to take advantage of that time to work with the other one that is not enrolled in the class, to work with them one-on-one, and just to be able to utilize that time in teaching them for a particular topic that is just for them. What does our daily routine look like? Well, we typically start our day around 8 or 9 a.m. and earlier if we have to be out of the house for a class. I have checklists for my youngest two students so that they know what they are responsible for. I'm big on cultivating the discipline of ownership with my children so they can assume responsibility for what they have to do. It is by no means a simple task. It's one that I often have to repeat time and time again, but I found that it eventually pays off, at least with my oldest two. When they hit around 7th or 8th grade, they were ready to take ownership for what they needed to do and didn't need my constant prompts to do their work or their checklist to do their work. How do I handle working with multiple students during the day? Well, now that I'm just primarily working with my youngest two, things are a lot simpler. They all have what I call independent subjects that they're able to read the directions and work through it on their own. They all have one-on-one subjects that they do with me. And of course, that's always math and possibly other subjects. And then we also have group subjects that we do all together. So, and that would usually be history or science, Bible, and literature. When I'm working one-on-one with the child, the other one will usually be working on their independent work. When they were younger and all four of them needed my help, then we had to rely more on a schedule, whereas now we utilize a routine more. One book that helped me tremendously with that was Managers of Their Homes. This is what it looks like. I think it's out of print, but you can find it on eBay or Amazon. And in that book, it just provided a lot of ideas on how to work with all four of my children when they all needed my help. So, what do I do with littles needing attention when working with older children? So again, that book had lots of ideas that I implemented. I set a schedule where I paired an older child with a younger child, and they were where the older child was in charge of doing an activity with them, whether it was playing a board game with them, reading a book to them, playing a math game, doing a craft, or even being the computer assistant if the younger child was playing an educational game and needed help. The older child also saw it as a break to be able to play a game during the school day, so it worked out. This is an example of one of my schedules that I found from about 5 or 6 years ago, where I had it color-coded what we were doing at each time of the day and who was doing what with whom. And so it does seem a little tedious, but in the end, it helped me as we went about our day to know exactly what each child was supposed to be doing to avoid some of that, well, what am I supposed to be doing now? And I need help now. So it avoided all of that with having the schedule in place. What about household chores? Well, there was also ideas in Managers of Their Home in that book for household chores. And I also came up with another schedule that we still use to this day, with chores for daily and weekly chores for each of the children. And so it rotates every month, which chores they're supposed to do. And again, it is tedious work to put together, but I just have to, once you have it, you just have to tweak it. And I gave everyone chores to do, including down to when my son was 3 years old. He was able to match the shoes and put them on the shoe shelf together. And I'm happy to report that since I read that book and came up with a schedule, I have not done dishes on a daily basis since then. I've also not done laundry for the entire family in the last 4 years. I purchased everyone their own laundry basket, and I freed myself from mountains of laundry. My youngest was 6 years old at the time, so I did have to purchase a step stool so that he could reach the washing machine. But my logic was that if he could work an iPad at 2 years old, then surely he was able to work a washing machine at 6 years old. And he was. Is their laundry perfect? No. Is it done exactly as I would do it? No. But I reclaimed so much of my time that it was worth it for me, and they're learning valuable life skills. I also call on them to help me in the kitchen so that they can acquire cooking and baking skills. When I had to travel out of town by myself, my oldest two were able to handle cooking dinner for the rest of the family with no problems. And my youngest two, they're able to make breakfast and lunch for themselves and also for their grandfather. So don't forget to focus on building children of good character. I love the book Parenting Teens with Love and Logic, and the earlier book for kids. The academics will come eventually. They'll get it, but it's harder to remediate character. How do I describe my homeschool style? I follow a classical approach, which includes teaching children how to learn and how to think. And then it follows 3 stages of learning. The grammar stage, when children naturally like to repeat and memorize material, and it builds upon that natural inclination for them to parrot and repeat and memorize. The dialectic stage, when our preteens and teens like to argue and debate with you about everything, you build on that natural inclination to teach them how to argue and how to debate with wisdom and eloquence. And then finally, the rhetoric stage, when older teenagers become independent thinkers, it teaches them how to write and speak eloquently and to put everything together. And all of this is known as the trivium. And when I first started looking into homeschooling, I read several books, and one of them was called Homeschooling Methods. And from there, I was able to identify the approach that appealed to me. And that was the classical method. And then I read The Well-Trained Mind by Susan Wise Bauer, which went into depth about how to implement the classical method based on the different age of your child. And so that was what I went with. It described what I wanted to do, but I didn't have a name for. And so I do recommend doing your homework in terms of the different styles and approaches to homeschooling, just so that you have a good idea of what works best for you. Why am I homeschooling and what are my goals? We started on this journey because our home was rezoned into a different school district that we weren't excited about and that we didn't buy into. And since I had just come home from the workforce, it seemed like a natural thing to do. However, since then, we've moved several times, but we've stuck with educating the kids at home because of our goals, which are to provide a strong educational foundation that each of our children could consistently receive versus the quality of their education being based on the luck of the draw in which teacher they happen to be assigned to. Another goal was to provide an environment where they could grow and develop in their faith, and also to cultivate strong familial bonds between siblings and between parents and siblings, parents and children. And so that was something that was important to my husband and I. And so that was one reason that we continued with it when we had other options. How do you decide exactly what to teach? Well, I choose curriculum that fits the classical approach, which can be easily be adapted to real life books. And also I look for curriculum that fits the needs of my learner and the needs of me as a teacher. We often talk about the learner's learning style, but you also have to recognize what your teaching style is. For example, for me, I recognize that I am a visual learner. So it would frustrate me to know and to teach math from a Saxon textbook. And even though everyone said Saxon was great, it was the best, when I looked through it, it was something that I knew would frustrate me as a teacher, and I wouldn't be excited about teaching it. So for math, we use Singapore math, which uses concrete examples, and then it uses pictures, and then it goes to abstract examples. And so that fit my needs as a teacher and also my students' needs. For language, we use the essentials of the English language, which is part of the classical conversations curriculum. And I found that it is very thorough. And in the classical tradition, it's designed for the student to go through the same curriculum 3 years in a row. And so each year with the intent that they will pick up more and more, and they will become more versed in the curriculum. But as an alternative to Essentials of the English Language, I have also used first language lessons, and I found that that was on par with the Essentials of the English Language in terms of the depth that it goes through. It's very easy, well laid out for the teacher to implement. And so I use the first two of the English, show you, first language lessons for the well-trained mind. I used the first two, and then after that, I was like, oh, this is too easy, and we moved on. But the third book, it beefs up a little bit with the language and the diagramming and going more into depth. So for writing, we use IEW. We had tried several writing programs prior to IEW, and my oldest daughter cried every single day, every single time we did writing. And it was very frustrating to me because writing was intuitive to me. And so it was difficult for me to understand her pain. But after using this curriculum, she went on to write short stories for fun. In her free time, she took college-level summer classes that focused on writing. So I can't recommend that writing program enough, especially if you have a child that doesn't get the writing process and it's not intuitive for them. It lays everything out systematically, but I feel like it still doesn't stifle the creativity of your writer. So that is IEW. For history, we have used the story of the world, but we also supplement a lot, especially for African and African American history, with real books, not necessarily a set curriculum or a textbook, but just with real books about events and people in African and African American history. For science, we have used lots of curriculums, but one of my favorites has been Real Science Odyssey, and it is a secular curriculum, but it has lots of hands-on labs, which makes the science fun for the kids and for me. I don't have a heavy science background, and so because of that, I looked for curriculums that I could get excited about so that I could convey that excitement to them. We've also used Apologia as well and used a lot of their hands-on experiments that they include in the textbook. I select curriculum based on recommendations from other moms that I talk to. I read reviews online. I look through materials at homeschool expos and use book sales to get an idea. But a lot of time it's word of mouth. How much do we spend? Our expenses change every year to year depending on how many students I have, if I'm adding a grade that I haven't taught before, etc. But the biggest expense is definitely for academic classes. We did not participate in them when my children were younger, but I feel that they are worth it as the kids grow older and they're seeking more independence from mom and seeking more independence from their younger siblings. I felt that the classes were more worth it then. I typically purchase my materials on eBay, used book sales, Amazon, or swap with other moms. What is the biggest piece of homeschooling advice that I've received? A mom told me to focus on your why. A lot of times we can get off course in our academic year when the kids are frustrated, you're frustrated as a teacher, and when you focus on your why you homeschool in the first place, you can line everything up that you're doing, and if it doesn't align with why you're homeschooling, then you can safely put it to the side and possibly try again later. It just helps to recalibrate when things get off course, which they will. What advice would I give to other homeschooling moms? One thing that I would say is to not compare yourself with other families or other children. Don't compare your children to others. No two families will look alike, and even no two children from the same family will perform exactly alike. You may sit there and think that you are failing your child when you learn that little Johnny sitting next to him in art class is trilingual and wrote his first treatise at the age of 10, and he plays the organ and the oboe. And meanwhile, you were proud that your child just remembered to use proper punctuation in a sentence. So it's a trap. Don't do it. We're just, God created us too differently to sit and compare side by side children or even other families and what they're doing. You have to find out what works best for you and what works best for your children. And finally, I would say to not forget to commemorate the time and experiences you have invested in your children. As moms, we spend a lot of time planning out their academics. We plan out their extracurriculars, their schedule, their field trips, but we can get so caught up in getting through our day-to-day that we forget what we've done and what we've accomplished. And so every year I've created a yearbook of our academic year. And so this is an example of one of them that I create on Shutterfly, Walmart, any of the popular bookmaking sites. And I know it seems like an extra something to do that can be a drag if you don't like to do that type of thing. But as I'm further down the road, I can say that my children really treasure their yearbooks. And without them, I know that 11 years later, I wouldn't really remember everything we did when she was in the first grade. You remember some of it, but as the years go by, the details fade. So I try to throw in as many details as possible into the yearbook, including, pictures of them in their extracurricular activities, pictures of them with their friends at those type of activities, the names of books that we read aloud that year, just as many details, or I may take a picture of some artwork that they did during the year and include that in the yearbook. As many details as possible I try to include in there because they will look back at those yearbooks with fond memories, and you will too, and be amazed at how much you were able to accomplish in an academic year. So I hope this has been helpful for you. You will not find me on social media, so please email me if you have any questions. I love to share what I've learned along my journey with other moms. So take care.